Locho sampo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe tinde yarngoda pegye drolor zampe zeparache panden lame shabla solwade Omo a guru vajradara suma timonishas Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajra Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradar Timunisha sane karma uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara suma timunisha sane vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Oma guru vajradara suma timunisha Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara suma timonishasa Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara suma timonishasa Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara suma timunisha sane karma Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara suma timunisha Vardanya Shri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timu Nisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke kudan dagi lo, pakyuke sundan dagi nga, pakyuke tukdan dagi yi, tün yerme çıktı çingi lo, makyuke kudan dagi lo, makyuke sundan dagi Makyuke tukdan dageyi tün yerme çıktı çingilo. Om Muni Muni Maha Shakyamuni Svoha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha Sangye chodan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyupsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chodan tsoge Dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola penchera sangue druparasho. Nel Buddha,
In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Namo Lai Ke Dan Ludan Nu Chin Ke Drubuda Da Mi Ke Nam Da Druwa Kun Ke Janam Chi Tsampa Tam Che Ke Tu Da Ge Che Ten To. Come abbiamo accennato questa mattina,
As we mentioned this morning, Buddha Shakyamuni described the possibilities of rebirths in the 6 realms. Actually, it's 3 realms and 6 realms. Okay, I explain better. Okay, there is a story that goes together with this that I like. It was one of the disciples of Buddha. There was a king. Now, unfortunately, I always forget names. Anyway, this king, at a certain point, receives from another king a very beautiful present, an armor that was all golden, precious stones, and made in an incredibly beautiful way. And he didn't have the wealth to pay back that gift, not even nearly. And it was a problem for him, because in the various diplomacies and balances between the various kingdoms, to receive a gift that is important and not be able to make an equally important gift is a sign of weakness. And so he went to Buddha and said, look, Buddha, I have a problem. I received this gift that is so beautiful and everything, but I don't have anything to give back. And he said, don't worry, I solve this for you. You do something. You call a good artist and you have this painted and you send this as a gift. And Buddha described the wheel of life, where at the center there are the 3 animals, a snake,
rooster, un gallo,
a rooster,
poi un maiale.
and then a pig. Around there is another circle divided in 6, which are the 6 realms of existence, so 3 upper realms and 3 lower realms, where you have the semi-gods, gods, and the human realm, and below you have the animal realm with the hungry ghost and the hell. Around this circle there is another circle with 12 parts that are called the 12 links of interdependence. That in a few words is the description of samsara itself, described with certain symbologies, with some drawings, some symbols. And around this there is a sort of monster that holds all of this inside his mouth, which is impermanence itself. And this is called the Wheel of Life. Buddha wanted this painted, and the king sends this as a gift to the other king. When the other king receives this gift, remains profoundly impressed, because by seeing that he was able to understand the nature of samsara. So it was like a very beautiful, important thing for him. And so then he went to thank the other king, and he was profoundly grateful, and then he brings it brings him to Buddha, and this brings him to many other things. And so this remains one of the schematic symbols in Buddhism that is one of the most important ones. Also recently I was in India in the caves of Ajanta. These caves, there were, I don't know the exact dates, was like 1600 years ago or something like that. And outside in one of the paintings there is the Wheel of Life. Also in Tibet there is we find it everywhere, also here we have it.
Là dovrebbe essere, adesso da qua non vedo, è finita. Se qua, di qua, vicino all'entrata della cabina dei traduttori? Ok, per quello che non la vedevo effettivamente, c'è di là. Comunque, questa ruota della vita...
Anyway, this Wheel of Life shows the following. At the center you have these three animals which represent ignorance, which is the pig. The pig eats anything, doesn't he? And so the pig takes whatever it's given to him and he takes it as a food and he eats that. Similarly, ignorance takes whatever appears as a reality and takes it, appears as an illusion and he takes it as a reality. And the rooster, I don't know how many of you have ever had chickens. Okay, but you have like in your mind, like, what does a chicken do all day long? Just goes like...
Oh no. Quindi la gallina cosa...
So the chicken represents desire, never stopping, never enough. We have more, we always want more and more. It's not that the chicken goes like, we're there one day in the morning and then sits there in the sun. No, constantly is picking and taking food. The snake represents hatred, anger.
Che viene rappresentato dal serpente perché l'odio
is represented by the snake because the anger, hatred has a destructive capacity that is huge. A brief moment of hatred can destroy a lot, like a single bite of a snake can destroy one life. It has a very powerful poison. So that's a symbology, nothing against these three animals. It's just a way of representing, to give a form to something. And then there are the 6 realms. You have...
Questo è quello che c'è al centro del cerchio.
This is what is at the center of the wheel, which is what makes it spin. Ignorance, aversion, and a desire. This cycle is an inner cycle, but in what way does it manifest? In a process that is a process of birth, old age, death and rebirth, and old age, and so on.
Questo viene chiamato nuovamente il ciclo del samsara.
This is called the cycle of samsara. This cycle of rebirth is mainly a cycle where one is reborn in an involuntary and unconscious way. A bit like as if I asked each one of you to come here and choose an object. Okay, here on the table we have various things. We have the microphone, we have this mala, you have the book, this other book, the singing bowl, the vase, and so on. Each one chooses one thing. Do we all choose the same? Why don't we all choose the same? Because we are different. That's it. But what motivates our choice? Our desire, our aversion, our predispositions, and so on. And technically speaking, we all are free to choose where and how to be reborn. And actually we choose how and where to be reborn. We are not reborn in a way like forced by someone to be reborn in samsara. But why is it not a free rebirth? Because we're not free from our own ignorance, our own attachment, aversions. And so we make some choices that are not free, not aware. And this cycle makes it so that according to the reality that one creates, can make some choices that can be very harmful, but one could say, but why would one choose to be in hell? There's no one sending me there. Why would I go there? And I ask you, when you sleep at night and you have a nightmare, did someone put that nightmare in your head? Whose fault is that of the nightmare? Because someone is punishing you. It's a punishment because someone is putting a nightmare on you, or is it simply that we create an interdependence that is negative because you had conflicts during the day and tension, and you went to sleep and those fears or whatever came up? And so, if we go backwards and check, we chose to have that nightmare, not in a way that it's aware.
Sì, nella pratica.
But practically we are not free of choosing to not have the nightmare because we're not free of our own ignorance, attachment, fear, and so on. And similarly, when we die, in the process of rebirth, as long as one hasn't managed to get out of this cycle of samsara, like these three animals, the ignorance, attachment, and diversion, as long as one is trapped inside that cycle, we'll keep living situations in an unconscious way. And of course, as one cycle begins, we don't have any choice rather than leaving it until the end. So I am born in a certain context, that life, okay, I have those parents, that body, that context, and that life is started and goes on until it ends. And when that life ends, there is that magic moment that is called bardo, where possibilities open. But also here, bardo is not necessarily a negative experience, but also not necessarily a good experience. Bardo resembles a dream a lot. So it's like when we go to sleep. Dreams can be beautiful or can be ugly. It depends on how we fell asleep and what we lived the day before and so on. And similarly, the bardo that one enters is strongly influenced, not determined, but influenced by the inner state with which one dies. Then it can change. If one dies badly and then there's a bad bardo, that can change inside of the bardo, yes. But what happens with this is that if I create a condition in a bardo that is not it's not good, then inside of that bardo I get into an unhealthy dynamic that brings me to have a bad rebirth. When we talk about a negative rebirth, we mean a rebirth with conditions of greater suffering. So these are described in the hell realm. And then to really go through the text, here we can name them. Then if one is curious, we can talk about them. One can read about them one by one.
Non c'è neanche bisogno tanto di entrare nei dettagli per volerli evitare. Ok? Perciò sono gli inferni.
So there are the hells, the hungry ghosts, and the animals. These are the three lower realms. That doesn't mean that the three lower realms are three upper realms unnecessarily, or roses and flowers. We have the human realm, which is the one that is the most balanced, because human life allows us to have some conditions that are favorable, if we have favorable conditions inside the human realm, because that it's not given for sure, and it allows us to be in touch with suffering, but not too much, because when there is too much suffering, one is not able to do anything else, rather than trying to get out of that suffering and reacting. When there is suffering and there are moments when one is well and so on, that allows oneself to have that inner space to comprehend, to try to do things in another way and so on. Because also, for example, the realm of Deva, the so-called gods, is a realm that is described of these beings that have an incredibly long life. One day in the realm of Deva, which have like the shortest life, because there are 33 realms of devas. Some texts maybe someone has read, in the realm of the 33rd, that means that there are 33, and the highest, they have the longest life possible, and that is okay, but anyway.
E all'interno di questi il
And inside of this, the first one day of this one corresponds to 50 years of our realm. And their life is something like at least 1,000 years of theirs. There are all these tables with the relationships of times. And so what happens is that one life for us, 1 hour of us, ours, for them is nothing.
Praticamente quello, no? E uno può dire, no, ma com'è questa cosa?
And one can say, but how is this? The best way for me to understand this was when I read a bit more, I tried to understand a bit more inside of physics, about the relativity of time in relation with the gravitational fields. So time changes according to how close we are to some gravitational changes. The more the gravitational field is dense, the more quickly time passes. For who's inside of that, maybe one has a perception of one day, but who's in a different context, the feeling of time is the same, but the time that passes actually is different. There's also one movie very well made, which is called Interstellar, if I remember well. There is this scene where some of them detach and go to another planet and stay there like 15 minutes, and then 45 years have passed when they come back. That movie was made on real calculations, not like randomly. And when I looked at that, I was like, wow, this has a coherence with what Buddha said about this relativity of time of the various realms. And so what is described is that the realms of the gods are very, very, very different, and they have a beautiful characteristic. They have a level of pleasure that is huge. Devas have this state where it is said that in the realm of Devas, I don't know if everywhere, but more or less, that okay, you want to eat something, you just think about the taste and you're already satisfied. The relationship between two people, you don't even have to touch each other, you just look at each other and then it's all there. You don't need an external light, you have your own inner light that you emanate, they have a beautiful smell, they are beautiful, they have many characteristics that are really incredible, in the sense a tremendous level of wealth, they have clairvoyance, and so on. What is the trick that someone needs to be there? First of all, it happens that somehow 7 days before their death, because they are clairvoyant, they will know, okay, you're going to die, and they see where they will have to be reborn, and usually is not in the God's realm. It's a bit like, okay, let's make an analogy. One is born with a huge heritage and lives a life where he spent everything here and there with the maximum of possible luxuries, and then someone comes and tells you, look, you have ran out of money. From here to 5 days, 1 week, you have to go and live in a small apartment in a community, in a poor neighborhood, because you have spent all your money and you even created debts. Now you don't have anything anymore. And in the realm of gods, then it gets to a point where, okay, what do? I see that I will go there, and then you start to lose. It starts to lose the characteristics of the god realms, so it starts to lose cyclominosity, that smell of the body. The others start to feel a sort of bad smell. You lose your friendships because everyone gets away from you, because you don't want to they don't want to get in touch with suffering. Okay, like you're not part of our elite anymore, you're put aside, so you lose all of that, and it is said that there is like a tremendous suffering in those last 7 days. And then when he dies, it's as if one has spent all the money, and then for a long time one has to go through a very difficult situation. And so the realm of the devas is very, very beautiful, but it's also where one spends a tremendous quantity of positive karmic force. So you have earned a lot of positive karmic force, but you have spent it with like trivial things, pleasure. And so this is one aspect of the realm of devas. Another aspect is that one lives a life of such strong pleasure that in no point one has the intention of getting in touch with someone else and to cultivate something virtuous, because one is totally trapped and taken by his own pleasures. At such a point that doesn't have the openness for a spiritual path to do something virtuous. So the tendency in the realm of devas is that at the end one consumes a huge quantity of positive karmic force and doesn't accumulate new one. And then there is the realm of the demigods, which is the one of those that are between the humans and the gods. So they don't have all the beauty and the pleasures that the gods have, but they are doing much better than the humans. So what happens is that they look at the gods and see that they are better, they are doing better, and they're strongly jealous, envious. So they have a whole life of envy. This energy is given.
Questo albero che realizza i desideri.
Like this tree of this tree that realizes desires, and this tree, and the part of the tree that gives fruits is in the Deva realm, and the part in the middle, where there is the trunk, is in the realm of the demigods. So they know about the tree, but they cannot enjoy the fruits, and you see the devas enjoying the fruits, and so they throw arrows towards the deva, but when the arrows goes to the devas, they transform into flowers, and so devas, they take the fruits of the tree, they spit down the seeds, which go like arrows of fire against the demigods, and so there is this pointless fight. The demigods would have everything to be well, but they cannot enjoy it because they don't have as much as the gods. So an analogy, like a middle class which is doing well, which is not able to enjoy because they don't have like as much as the highest elite. But look, I've studied this, and why does he have this and I don't know, and I don't have, and so there is an envy that is consumed from the inside during life. And so is described that the realm of the devas and the demigods, which are called the asura, will technically have the capacity and possibility of following a spiritual path. The gods and demigods are very intelligent beings. My master Trijang Rinpoche, by talking in a context, he said, look here there is the reincarnation of a demigod. One of the signs is that they are children who are extremely intelligent. This is one of the signs that they bring. They are very intelligent beings, but that as demigods, the greatest majority of them are not able to use in a positive way their intelligence because they are trapped by their own envy. So they spend their whole life around that wanting to hit the gods. And then there is us, humans. The human realm is a realm where there is like the desire of not obtaining the object of desire, the suffering of rebirth and of getting old and dying. We have so many conflicts and problems that we know well. On the other hand, the human realm has also the characteristic of intellectual capability, which allows us to see the past and project us in the future, which is something that the animal realm doesn't have. It's not that an animal is inferior I am convinced that there are animals that are much better than many people, if you go and check on many aspects. But what happens is that human beings have a characteristic that the greatest majority of the other animals don't have, which is the mental capacity of revisiting the past and projecting oneself in the future. So this is something that when it's used well, it's beautiful, and when it's not done well, then it's against us. It's like the story of the zebra in the savannah. Once there was a doctor telling the story in a congress. He said that, okay, imagine a zebra that is there on the grass, nice calmly, the heart beating slowly. At a certain point, the lioness comes and she's hunting. What does it happen? The zebra just stays there calmly? No, the heart goes like super hard, and so she starts running as fast as possible to run away from the lioness. At a certain point, she manages to run away. The lioness sees another, maybe a gazelle, and she goes somewhere else. And she needs at least like around 5 minutes to go back, eating the grass calmly like before. More or less, like after like such a big threat, in like 5 minutes, the zebra is already rebalancing herself. Emotionally, is already balanced again. And still there, like eating the grass as if nothing had ever happened. What happens if we were the zebra?
Ok? Finisce, non
It ends, we don't see the lioness again, and then you see, maybe it's there again, maybe it's better if I keep running. Then at a certain point we manage to get home, we close all the doors, more than better. You never know, you go and institute the National Day against lions, you change diet, I cannot eat the grass because it's too dangerous for me, and every time that we go close to that place and they bring us some grass from there, then you have the heart and the fear. What happens is that we have this capacity of revisiting the past and projecting ourselves in the future, and it's like a joke. I saw once a sketch drawn. I saw like a dog with a man in front of a sunset. Anyway, the question was like, why is the dog happier than the human? And they were both like looking in the same direction. And then there was like a cloud with the thought of each one of them. In the man, there was the thought of the job and tomorrow, yesterday, this and that. And the dog, in the cloud of the dog, there was the dog and the owner, and just them looking at the sunset. And so what happens is that this capacity that we have of revisiting the past and projecting ourselves in the future is what allows us to imagine, to create incredible things, but also to create a lot of suffering, conflicts and fears. And used in a bad way, it creates all the stress that we live.
Abbiamo una capacità in più.
And so we have further capacity that comes really from this physical constitution, and if it's used well, life in a human body is what has the best conditions, by all means, to go through a spiritual growth path. It's not that life itself is superior in the sense that I am better than you. No, that there are some conditions that are more suitable for a spiritual path. This means that does this mean that in the animal realm you cannot have a spiritual growth? No, there can be. There are different stories. Buddha Shakyamuni, along his path as a bodhisattva, before becoming Buddha, he had various lives, and he shared 1,000 of these lives, which are called the Chatakateras. This story of Chataka, there are 500 lives as a human and 500 lives as an animal. In both cases, he was already a bodhisattva. going through a process of spiritual growth. So it is not so that an animal cannot go through a spiritual path, but we have very particular conditions as humans. Here the Lam Rim
Se noi ci troviamo davanti a un bivio, 3 reami
says, okay, if you are like in a crossroad, 3 upper realms or 3 lower realms, where would you go? I don't know, if someone maybe is curious and wants to get to know else, let's see, just, to see how it's like. Yeah, if one can go as a tourist, it could be, but
Però se uno vorrebbe vederli veramente,
one who really want to see them, it's not that you have to also travel so much. You have like also realities on this planet that are very, very heavy.
perciò non c'è dubbio dove
So there is no doubt where do we want to go. I want to go at least in the upper realms, then the gods' realms or demigods or human. The one of the 3 is fine. And on the basis of this, as we are in the Lam Rim, it brings us to, okay, what do I have to do to make it so that I can have a good rebirth, a rebirth that is not in these lower realms? To avoid negative actions, and it's here that some indications are given, which are not affixed to rules of what a Buddhist should do. This is interesting. There hasn't ever been in any moment where someone says, okay, but what should a Buddhist not do? There isn't anything, but like many things that Buddha says, okay, this is not convenient. It's not that you can't. We are all free to do whatever we want to do. We are not free from the consequences of our actions. And so Buddha says, look, there are some things that are not convenient for you to do, like to kill. It's not convenient to steal, to have sexual misconduct. These are all actions that generate suffering. Sexual misconduct, is, without getting into details now, is about both betrayal and abuse. Abuse in the sense of using the other person as an object for one's own pleasure without having a minimum of consideration for the needs of the other person. So also inside of when there is no betrayal, so cheating, like inside of a couple, marriage and so on, there can be abuse. Until a few days ago they were discussing in India, and then the law didn't pass. They were trying to become crime the abuse meant as sexual abuse inside of marriage. Then the law didn't pass, unfortunately. In the Buddhist vision, abuse is abuse, the point, full point. Doesn't matter the context. So when we talk about a sexual misconduct, we mean both cheating, because cheating generates suffering, and mostly the part of abuse. And then there are many different levels of abuse. The abuse on a strongest level is rape itself. Then there are some kind of manipulation where one tries to get what he or she wants from the other and doesn't take into account the needs of the other. Then there are subtler levels when one really doesn't care so much, takes for granted the other person, doesn't care about seeing the needs of the other. And all of these are actions that generate, from the point of view of the physical action, these are actions that Buddha described as generating negative karmic force. Then there is violence in general. It's not just killing, but it's also using violence against the others. Destroying the environment is also another negative action that is described. And then we have actions of speech, so lying, using separative words, even also saying the truth but to create division, separation, using violent speech, being aggressive,
parlare a vanvere
to
nel
talk,
senso di stare lì a chiacchierare e dire cose che
to talk
diciamoci la
nonsense,
verità, quando stiamo lì a parlare a
gossiping.
di solito quali sono gli argomenti? La bodhicitta?
So when we are talking kind of
Parliamo no perché sai
nonsense, do we talk
che nello
about
sviluppo
bodhicitta,
per la
or
corretta
because
visione
in
della
the
realtà è
development
la
of the correct
bodhicitta
view of
più
reality,
importante.
because of
Quali
bodhicitta,
sono
and
gli argomenti?
what are the
Stiamo lì a
subjects when we
rigioire della vita
gossip?
degli altri?
Are we rejoicing about the lives of the others?
Di solito riguardano
Usually they are about
attrazione e
attraction and
avversione.
aversion.
E se io critico
And if I
qualcuno vado a fare
criticize
una
someone
pettegolezza
and I
piuttosto che
gossip
di solito
about
vado ad
someone,
aumentare o l'attrazione
usually
o
it
l'avversione,
increases
o
either
attaccamento e
attraction or
desiderio o
aversion,
la rabbia,
or
avversione o
so either
eccetera. Queste sono le
attachment
due
and
cose che
desire
vanno a
or
parlare, perché
anger
le parole
aversion,
direzionano la
because
mente.
words
Il
direct the
parlare
mind.
a vanvere
So
è qualcosa che Buddha
bubbling
descrive come l'azione negativa più debole che
is
esiste,
the
ma quella che
weakest
porta alla fine i risultati forti.
weakest
Perché
action, but
parlare a
that
vanvere in sé per
brings
sé è
the
praticamente nulla, ma
strongest
quando
results. Because
accumulato,
babbling by itself is nothing, you know, but when it's accumulated, then it becomes a lot.
e se noi vediamo nella nostra vita
And if we
quante
check in our
volte
lives,
stare lì
how
a
many
quelle
times
chiacchiere apparentemente
have we
innocenti
been
creano
there in those apparently
conflitti,
innocent
creano avversione,
talks
creano
that then
gelosie,
create
invidie.
conflicts and jealousy and envy and
Io
so
non
on?
credo che dobbiamo
So I don't
tutti
believe
vivere
that we
voto
should
di
all
silenzio,
take the vow
ma
of
nel dubbio
silence,
meglio stare
but in
zitti.
the doubt it's better to be silent.
Non so dire, non dire, non dire. Ok?
I don't know
Sono
whether
in
to
una
say or
situazione, non
not.
so cosa
Say
dire.
it, then
Fai
don't say it.
benissimo.
I'm in a situation I
Non
don't
c'è
know what to
niente
say.
di
That's
male.
very good.
Ok?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Perché la parola ha un potere
Because
enorme di direzionare
speech
la
has a
mente e
tremendous
conseguentemente le
word,
azioni.
has a tremendous power to direct mind and
Poi
consequently
abbiamo
action.
le azioni negative,
Then we have
come
negative
desiderare la
actions,
sofferenza
such as
dell'altro,
desiring
che è la peggiore
the
forma.
suffering of the other, which is the worst amongst all.
C'è il desiderare ciò che è
There
posseduto
is
da un altro che
the
noi non
the
potremmo
wishing
avere,
to own
che
something
porta
that the other
anche
has,
altre azioni
that then
negative.
brings also other negative
Ci sono le
actions.
cosiddette visioni
There are
erronee,
the
qua
so-called
siamo
wrong
in una
views.
porta,
Here we are
magari
another
nell'ambito più avanti
door.
arriva,
It will come later also
però
in the Lam
riguarda
Rim.
comunque sia il
But it's
fatto
also
di
about the
avere delle
fact of
visioni
having
di
some
modi di
views
vedere il mondo che
of seeing the
portano a
world
un
that
modo
bring
di vivere la vita
to a
che
way of
sia
living that
malsano,
is
violento.
unhealthy and violence and so
Perché
on.
basta pensare per
We can
esempio
just
quando
think,
noi
for
vediamo
example,
fra le
when we
varie
see
visioni
amongst
politiche,
the various politic
sono
views,
alcune che
there are
portano
some
verso una maggiore
that
violenza.
bring towards a greater
Così almeno mi pare,
violence, or at
A
least it
vedere ci
seems to
sono
me.
certe
And if we
visioni,
check,
di solito quando vanno verso gli estremi,
usually when they go to the
portano
extremes,
verso una maggiore
that
violenza.
bring
Questa è
to a
una
greater
visione
violence, and
erronea.
this is
È
a
una
wrong
visione
view,
che poi dopo
which
porta
is something that
diverse,
then
non solo una visione
brings
incoerente della realtà,
not
ma
just an
porta
incoherent view of reality, but also many
E da
negative
questo dall'altra
actions.
parte Buddha ci dice, guarda, per
And
evitare
on the other hand,
risultati
Buddha
negativi in
says,
futuro,
look, to avoid negative results in the future,
cercate almeno
try at least
di evitare di uccidere,
to avoid killing,
di evitare di
to
rigioire
avoid
quando qualcuno
rejoicing
viene ucciso,
when someone gets killed,
di evitare
to
di
avoid
dare gli ordini a qualcun altro di
giving
uccidere.
orders to someone else to kill.
Cercate almeno
Try
di
at least
non rubare,
to not steal,
non far rubare ad
to
altri,
not
non rigioire
make
delle
the
altre
others
fughe.
steal and to rejoice of that.
Cercate di
Try
avere una condotta
to
sessuale
have a
coerente,
coherent
corretta,
sexual
evitare una condotta sessuale
a sexual
scorretta.
conduct, and to avoid a sexual misconduct, avoid abuse.
Cercate di,
Try,
come ho detto, non uccidere,
as
non rubare, non mentire, non avere una condotta sessuale scorretta. E poi cercate almeno
and then
di
try at
preservare
least
la
to
vostra
preserve
sanità
your
mentale
own mental
e
health
chiarezza mentale,
and clarity,
evitando sostanze che
avoiding
tolgono la
substances
chiarezza
that take
della
away
mente.
the clarity of mind.
In tibetano si dice
In Tibetan
"Chang Nyeba Kunjuko". L'alcol
is
è la
said
porta di
alcohol
tutte le
is the
altre
door
azioni
of all
negative.
other negative
C'era la
actions.
storia di
There is
questo
a story
ragazzo
of this
che
this guy that takes the vow of not killing, not stealing, not lying, not having a sexual misconduct, and so on. And then at a certain point, he's forced to choose. He had to break one of his vows. It may seem like an absurd situation, but for example in Mongolia, the terrible years that Mongolia lived under communism, monks were often forced to break their vows in public. So to have sexual intercourse in public, like really heavy things happened in Mongolia. What Mongolia lived is ugly to compare the suffering of two countries, but that's on many aspects worse what was happened in Tibet. It was a very strong, rigid communism against religion, if I remember well, from like 37 to 91.
Era una sorta di regione.
It was a sort of region below the Soviet Union, was not part of it, but was under it. They destroyed Buddhism and religion in a tremendous way. The main monastery that was there, which was the monastery of Ganden, Gelugpa, it is said that there were so many monks that when there were ceremonies that they all had gone, they went to the 4 directions with the gong on the camels to call people, because it was so big. There were like more than 10,000 monks living there. They come to the point that there was not even one left. And the few that were left, then at the beginning of the 90s, when the Soviet Union ended, and there was this sort of liberation of Mongolia, some that were monks, former monks, the only way that they had to save themselves was to get married, pretend that they didn't know anything, and live in total anonymity for like 40 years. And one of these that survived all of that was the grandparent of a friend of us that also came here, of Sempa, that was with us in Mongolia, and that also came here. His grandpa was one of those few that were left that had the knowledge of the past, and he was one of those that made relieve the Buddhism. And so there was a story of this man. Look, where he was said to him, look, you have to choose between your vows and choose to break one of them. You had the vow of not killing, not stealing, not lying, not take not have a sexual misconduct, and not to take intoxicants. What is the less harmful one? Okay, to drink alcohol. And then he drinks alcohol, he loses control, he sees a girl towards which he has a lot of desire, he abuses of them. It's not that he has a sexual intercourse, but he abuses of her, breaks the second vow. Then after that he has a lot of hunger, he steals a goat and kills the goat
e quindi alla fine dei conti poi c'è anche la bugia.
And then somewhere there is also the lie in between, but I don't remember well. The point is that at the end it is said that alcohol intoxicates mind, brain, and the person loses the capacity of control. When a person inside of herself spontaneously has some beautiful qualities and gets drunk, what does she manifest? Those beautiful qualities. I don't know, I believe that many of us have seen like a drunk person becoming extremely funny, like a nice person, a good character. There are some people that when they're drunk, you see the darkest aspects coming out, so the desires that in general one is able to contain, and the aversion.
Addirittura quando c'è stato il nuovo carabiniere qua di Premeno,
even when there was the new
è venuto da noi a parlare, con la
policeman here in Premeno, he said, okay, but here how does it work with alcohol? No, we at the center don't admit alcohol. Ah, okay, then I will have less work. The majority of the interventions of the policemen are caused by the use of substances, among which alcohol, which is one of the greatest problems. So when we say to avoid the use of alcohol, it means to value mental clarity. Then if one drinks a glass of wine here and a beer there, it's one thing. Another thing is when that becomes a continuous thing, because when one drinks very often, it gets to a point where even unconsciously, or at least he doesn't see, but the mind is foggy, doesn't have all the clarity that it could. Alcohol, among other things, what it does is that physically it intoxicates the brain. And so, what we said before, okay, I want to avoid cognitive degeneration with ears, alcohol doesn't help. It's one of the important causes for that. So, when Buddha tells us, look, if you want to have a healthy life, and you want to take care of your future, try to avoid killing, to avoid stealing, to avoid lying, to avoid to have a sexual misconduct, to avoid substances that take away mental clarity and control of oneself, alcohol and drugs. It's not that one drinks a little glass of wine and then, it's a sin because I could drink a glass of wine, now what will happen to me? It's not that. The point here is not whether we can or not. The matter is it good or bad for me? Point is the habits that we create. And the real difficulty that we have as human beings is that we have a hard time to can just see, because just check the use of alcohol in the first years. Here at the center it was admitted to drink alcohol, then we started to see many situations of people that were drunk, discussions, fights and so on. Then we said, okay, here this is not fine. And it was much better. But in our society, how many problems are created by alcohol? By drugs? It's not a joke. And so, that's something that absolutely we should keep in mind. On the other hand, what Buddha was saying is that, okay, you want to have a good future, try to respect and value life, and to avoid killing, to avoid lying, and to respect and value the truth, so to avoid lying, to try to have healthy relationships, so to have a good sexual conduct, to try to have a good relationship with others in the society is to avoid stealing, and to value your mental clarity is to avoid taking substances that take this away. So it's very coherent. And so at this point, it's not that if I do this I will go to hell. It's not like that. But there are some actions that are done with violence, done with anger and hatred, that will not bring good results. In the sense that I plant the pepper seed, I will not collect some oranges. The result will be spicy. There will not be much difference. So if I don't want to have spicy results, I will avoid planting chili seeds. And it's not a matter of compassion, it's a matter of loving oneself and having a conduct that is not just about the present, but is also able to look at the future. And so, just to take back here the points of the text, it says to contemplate the characteristics of happiness and suffering that are experienced in the 6 main types of migration. By migration we mean migration from one life to the other. The word sentient being in Tibetan is called drowa, which means to go. migrate. And we are migrators between one realm and the other, one life and the other. So the two types are that either we will have more positive rebirths, so in the three upper realms, or in the three lower realms. To contemplate the suffering of the hell beings, and here gets in details, so the suffering of the great hells, the constant resurrection hell. This place described as being in a constant war where weapons arise spontaneously. The weapons are there. People are getting into this continuous fight, and when everyone is dead, there is like a voice saying, okay, now let's start again, and you start like from scratch. But then when we get into the details, the most creative ones, they get to a level, says that, okay, it's a reality that, for example, when part of an arm is cut, the part that falls keeps on feeling that pain, even if it's not. They get into some really terrifying details. And then we get the black line hell, where you have like some lines drawn on you, and then the beings are cut, but they feel each part of their body, and this is repeated. The assemble and be crushed hells, like beings are crushed between like mountains. The hell of lamentation, where they are placed inside of a house of burning iron, constantly constant lamentation. The hell of the great lamentation, the house is even bigger, burns even more. The hot hell and the extremely hot hell are these hells where there is this fire, this iron that is melted, and in the hottest one there is like it's the next one, which is called the hell without respite. It gets to a point where there isn't even any distinction anymore between the body and the fire. Now, okay, if we get into the details of the hells, they are very heavy. Okay, now I don't get into the details now, one is enough. And the important thing for me that is important, and I'm sorry to say like this, it's not something like
inventata,
made up to manipulate people, because there is who thinks so, who say, look, hell, what hell are you talking about? This is just a way to have control about people. You tell some stories of danger, so you can manipulate people. Which can also happen. Like, okay, if I can prevent people from doing stupid things by telling some fearful stories, but if we look around us, then we can see hell. We were talking about this before, and unfortunately, when we start to observe, once I was in the Netherlands, and for some reason I ended up the teachings, and I had to take the flight the day after, and I remained to sleep in the airport in Amsterdam. And I remember that I was there in that room, I turned the TV on, and there was this documentary about Liberia, this country in Africa, and of the country that was there. And even today, the images that I saw there, they had such a level of suffering and violence that one can even has a hard time to repeat them. Can you imagine, in Liberia there was the time where it was said that more than 80% of women were abused or raped. More than 50% of the people practice cannibalism, without talking about other problems that were insane, like reality. It was really, really insane. So, also, if we check Sudan, what happens there? The world has many situations that are really a disaster. What on one hand impresses me, like the movie where we talked about before, okay, now we are on the higher floors, and we say, okay, we look, we say, oh, I'm sorry, but it's not that we do so much. I talk as a society. Now, I don't want to judge no one, but in general, on planet Earth, there will be resources for everyone and the capacity to take care of everyone. But what is the point here is that there is hell, and they're not far. There are beings that find themselves in hell next to us, inside of their minds. There are beings that are in physical hell, external hell. And something that is said in some texts, that is very strong, and I say it here, but it has a lot of sense to say it.
Lo dico, non lo dico, va bene, lo
Shall
dico.
I say it or not say it?
Viene detto, è un modo molto forte
It's a
di
very strong way of saying it, so we cannot take it literally, but it passes the idea. It says the only thing
esiste fra
that
noi
exists between
e una possibile
us and a
rinascita
possible
dell'inferno oggi
rebirth in hell today is a breath,
è smettere di respirare.
is stopping to breath,
Il giorno
to
che uno
breathe.
smette di respirare
The
muore.
day one stops to breathe, one dies.
Che cosa c'è dopo?
And what is after that, who knows?
Si aprono varie possibilità.
Many possibilities open up.
E quando dicono quindi vuol
And
dire che
here
uno dovrà
one
per
says,
forza
then
rinascere
one
nell'inferno?
has to
No.
be reborn in hell?
In nessun momento si dice quello.
No,
Però
no
vuol dire che uno
point
per forza
is
non
that is
rinascerà
said,
nell'inferno.
but
Neanche.
does it also say that one shouldn't be reborn in hell? No, that is also not also the case. Depends on the causes and conditions and the results.
Perciò
And so
ritorna in un luogo che non è uno scherzo. Dobbiamo vivere oggi il presente.
And so we have to live the present in a coherent and sane way if we want to have a positive and sane future.
E non c'è nessuna minaccia.
And there is no
È una
threat.
questione di
It's a
coerenza,
matter
non è una
of
questione
coherence, it's not a matter
Non so se è chiaro questo.
of a threat.
Perché
I don't know
io
if this is clear
ci stavo
because
pensando
I was
ancora
thinking
ieri,
about
stavo
it
leggendo
also
il Lam Rim
yesterday. I
di
was
Lama
looking
Michel
through the Lam Rim of Lama Tsongkhapa,
Rinpoche. Come affrontiamo
and I was
l'inferno?
like, okay, how do we face the subject of the hells? Because it's much more convenient to just jump
Io so che nella
this
nostra
part, because I know that in this culture is something that we have a hard time with,
Però io credo che
but
sia
I believe
necessario
that it's
per noi
necessary for us
permetterci di
to
guardare
allow
lo
ourselves to look at the suffering
e poter dire io
and to be able to say, I want to avoid it,
e capire che le nostre azioni oggi
and to
hanno un
understand that
collegamento
our
con il
actions
nostro
today
futuro,
have
che non è
a
una
relation with our future, which is
Una
not a
persona che
condemnation.
compie un'azione
A
negativa,
person
che
that
pianta un
commits
seme
a negative
negativo,
action and
per
plants a
quanto sia
negative seed,
forte,
for
non è che è condannato a
how strong
dover
that
per
may be,
forza
it's not
vivere
that that
questo
person is
risultato
condemned to
incontro, ma è
live
una
that
possibilità in più.
result, but it's a possibility more.
Perciò la chiave qua è prendiamo cura dell'oggi, prendiamo cura della nostra condotta,
So the key is,
avere una condotta
let's
sana,
take care of today and let's be careful to have a virtuous, sane conduct because we want to have a good future.
ma questo è un
Is it
egoismo un
selfish?
pochettino
Yes,
più
but this is a type of
L'egoista
selfishness
sano
that
è
is a
quell'egoista
bit
che
more
sa
sane,
guardare un po' al
that is
futuro
able
e
to
non solo
look at the
il
future and not just at the present.
È un po' come
It's like
se noi prendiamo in considerazione
as if
le
we take
generazioni
into
future,
account the future generations,
diciamo che prendessimo in
and
considerazione il fatto
let's
che
say that we
quando
take into
moriamo
account that when we will
dovessimo per
die,
forza di cose
and
ritornare in questo pianeta.
okay, when we die, we have to come back to this planet, which is also
Vengono
not
descritti che
given
ci
for
sono
sure.
zambolini
It's described that there are
che vuol dire centinaia di
hundreds
miliardi
of
di milioni di
billions of millions of words.
È un numero
It's like a
dico
number,
centinaia, dico
it's
milioni di
a
miliardi di milioni perché è un
billions of
numero
millions because it's
enorme,
like a tremendously high number.
fare il calcolo per vedere esattamente che cos'è, ma è un numero molto 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 grosso, che vengono descritti di mondi, ogni mondo è come un
And
sistema solare,
each word is like a solar system.
perciò ci sono tante
So
possibilità,
there are many possibilities, many realities.
di possibilità di come, dove, però pensiamo a questo nostro
But
pianeta.
let's think about this planet. Let's think about this here. Let's say that we are always reborn on this planet. If we will all have this awareness of continuity after death that touches that it's up to us to go back here. We will destroy nature like we are doing. I hope not. The probability decreases. I remember of reading once in ancient Greek, I don't remember where, if it was like Sparta or I read that those that had to write laws, decide laws, when there were some important changes in the laws, like for example, to change the constitution and things of this kind, laws that had an impact on the lives of all people. You didn't have like a referendum. What you will do is that those that would write the law, they had to vote it and so on, but those that wrote it, once that it was approved, they had to be killed, and they knew it. That was something that they knew. They took their life away, but they didn't have a choice. They would die after the law was approved. Why? They believed in reincarnation, but they didn't know in what part of the society they will be reborn. So this was a way to make it so that their law was equanimous for all those in society, because that was the only way to have total certainty of that, because then that law would last for centuries. If we had a greater awareness of continuity, we would have a very different way of behaving. What comes out of all of this is the aspect that it's not enough to think about the present moment. We have to be present in the present moment, but to act today, being careful about what will happen tomorrow. This morning we made example of Brazil. The only solution that I see for Brazil in this sense is if we manage in Brazil to invest a lot in education, in the healthcare system, in taking care of the various people of society, and to change some unhealthy dynamics that have been there for a long time, and to do that in a way that it's coherent for at least 3 generations. If during these 3 generations we follow some things, then we can get to some results. Because those are things that they require a long time. But today, thinking about ourselves, is important to have this awareness of the continuity.
Come se non bastasse, ci sono gli 8 inferni.
As if there wasn't enough, we have the 8 cold hells, which we haven't mentioned. The main difference is that while the hot hell realms have the characteristic of hatred and anger, the cold ones have the characteristic of sadness, depression, solitude, loneliness. Maybe it's so cold that there isn't even any light. Okay, let's see, let's go through them quickly.
Qua non vengono descritti uno per uno.
They're not described one by one. Here.
Poi ci sono gli spiriti famelici.
Then there are the hungry ghosts, as we have said.
No, le principali sofferenze dei
main
spiriti famelici è caldo, freddo, fame.
Types of suffering of the hungry ghosts are heat, cold, hunger, thirst, exhaustion, and fear. So those are beings that are constantly taken by heat, cold, or hunger, or thirst, exhaustion, and fear.
E tanta paura. Non è che c'è da andare molto.
And also we don't need to go particularly far to find people that are in this state. Now, without getting into the various details.
Poi ci sono le sofferenze del reame animale.
Then there is the suffering of the animal realm, of which we've already talked about, and here it gets into a lot of details and so on.
E quindi la risposta che viene dopo è qual è il
And
metodo
the answer that comes after that is the question that comes after that is what is the method to obtain happiness in the future lives? And here there is the fundamental part, which is to have a coherent conduct. When we see things that are not fine, when we see suffering, when we see problems, one of the mistakes that we sometimes do is that of staying there and pointing the finger towards the problem instead of putting energy in towards the solution. We sometimes want to destroy the problem rather than building the solution.
Per esempio,
For example, by destroying the enemy, you never obtain peace.
è una regola molto
It's a very simple rule, actually.
Non so se avete mai provato
No. Have you ever tried to destroy the enemy? A home, or maybe at work, or in a bad divorce? There's a situation where there is a strong conflict and the other is the enemy, and one goes against and against and against.
più vado contro, più mi
And then eventually, the more I go against the other, the more I have the other against me, and this never ends, and the suffering constantly increases.
ci vuole molta più energia per costruire la
It's much more energy is required to build peace rather than to make war. And not only that, you need sincerity, you need coherence, you need courage. Because courage that peace requires is the courage of seeing the other and to go towards the other and to get out of one's own comfort zone and to create a common place. And often one is not available to do that. It's not open to do that. But when we go and check from the medium to long term, if we think about the world point of view, the resources that the humans invested in the last century, which is a part of history about which we have a lot of much more knowledge. How much money was invested for war in the last 100 years? How many trillions? Millions of billions. If we had to compare that with how much energy has been invested in the energy that has been placed in building peace. Building peace means to take care one of the other. You need that. There are many things that are about that. Because I tried once in the very micro. There was a person that had something against me. It was not about the center. It was in Milan many years ago. And every time she was getting angry, and then I was like, no, here I have to make it. And I had some aversion. No, okay, I have to do it. And I was even kinder than what I would generally be, maybe. And every time I would be like, good morning, how are you? At the beginning, she was like, "Rrr." Then slowly, and then also with some mean things in the middle, and then one day she invites me for lunch, and then we become friends, so to speak, but there was no hostility anymore.
Di solito,
And usually, when someone receives love that is sincere, sooner or later drops that attitude of being on the defense or on the attack.
quindi mi chiedo,
So I ask myself,
quanta energia è stata investita sulla pace?
when there are conflicts, how much energy has been invested in peace and how much towards the conflict? Because the energy invested on the peace or on the conflict, it's not about the moment of the conflict itself, but the energy that is invested inside. Because if, as a country, I invest an important quantity of the resources to prepare for war, a part of the energy, what am I preparing for the conflict, I'm putting energy towards that.
bello che diciamo no, vogliamo investire.
Imagine how beautiful it would be that, okay, we want to invest 3% of the gross internal product for peace, to bring peace.
Sarebbe bello, no?
Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Io sarei d'accordo.
I would agree.
Poi come
Then
farlo?
how, that's a whole different thing, a world opens up.
Però
But
nella nostra piccola vita, il nostro
our
piccolo,
own little,
vediamo questo nelle nostre
we see
relazioni,
this
molto
in our own relationships. It's much easier
entrare nella
to get
reazione,
into
reagire
the
di mezzo
reaction towards
agisci con
against the
aggressività,
other. You react with aggressiveness, I also react. It's much easier.
Abbiamo parlato oggi all'inizio delle vie
I
neurali.
talked about this
Siamo
at the
abituati,
beginning today,
abbiamo,
about the
entriamo in
neuronal
dinamiche.
ways, paths, we get into that dynamic and so on, but what we saw is that violence brings violence,
Violenza
and
porta
violence
sofferenza,
brings suffering.
sofferenza
Suffering
porta più
brings
sofferenza.
more suffering.
Quindi quando io
And
nella
so,
mia vita
when me, in my own life, I
con
act with
aggressività,
aggressiveness,
con violenza,
with violence,
verbale,
with that is verbal,
mentale,
mental,
verso chiunque,
towards anyone,
perché
because
verso chi non giustifica, non cambia.
towards whom it doesn't justify anything. Whether I am aggressive towards someone that has, like, so to speak, the label of the bad guy or of the good guy, the aggressiveness and violence is the same.
Perciò alla fine
And so, at the end, it's harmful to me.
quindi succeda quel che succeda.
So, whatever happens, I don't want to get into unhealthy, harmful dynamics.
Qua ci vuole una forza di
And
volontà
here we
enorme.
need an enormous strength of will.
Ed è per questo che si parla dei
And it's for
problemi.
this
Per questo che è importante
that we are talking about the
vedere
problems,
l'ombra.
and that for this is important to see the
Vede
shadows.
l'ombra non per aver paura
You see, you
dell'ombra,
look
non
at the
perché
shadow,
guarda come
not to
stanno le
be
cose
afraid
male.
of that and to see
Si vede l'ombra per dire
how
esiste
bad are
l'ombra
things.
e
No,
vogliamo
to say,
evitarla.
okay, but there is, it exists also the shadow, and we want to avoid it.
Quando per esempio parliamo di
When,
malattie,
for example, we're talking about diseases,
è importante capire
it's
le
important to understand
Noi, per esempio,
diseases.
viviamo
For example, we
all'interno
live inside of
altro
a,
che Covid. Siamo in una
other than
pandemia
COVID, we
non
are
dichiarata,
inside of a non-declared
pazzesca di
pandemic that
cancro
is
dei tumori.
incredible, of cancer.
Personalmente sono
Personally,
convinto,
I am convinced of
no,
this.
non è così.
Then, well, someone could say, no, it's not like that.
Spieghi il perché,
Okay, you explain
ascolto.
why, and I listen.
Però se io guardo intorno
But
a
if I
me,
look around me,
abbiamo due pandemie
we have
sia
two
per quella
pandemics,
salute mentale
mental health,
che
that
negli ultimi
in the
10
past
anni
10
c'è stato
years
un crollo
there has been like a
spaventoso
tremendous collapse.
che stranamente
Strangely
corrisponde
relates
all'aumento
with
dei
the
media
increase
sociali e
of
degli
social
usi
media
cellulari.
and the usage of smartphones.
Ci sarà una relazione,
Maybe there is a correlation. I don't know.
è ovvio.
It's obvious.
Il crollo della salute mentale a livello mondiale è
Collapse of the mental health
una ventina
on
d'anni
a
fa,
world scale started
con
around 15 years ago
l'inizio
with the
di internet, eccetera,
with
e
the
poi con l'inizio dei
beginning of social
cellulari che
media
fanno
and
i
internet,
ragazzi,
and then phones in the hands of kids.
i media sociali, è proprio lì è stato
That
la
and then
decadenza
there
totale.
was the total decay.
Quindi abbiamo una crisi enorme di
So
salute
we
mentale.
have a
Abbiamo una crisi
huge crisis of
enorme
mental
della
health,
salute
huge crisis
dal punto
of
di vista dei tumori.
health from the point of view of cancer. When I talk with doctors, sometimes
Guarda, io non so, sempre
tell
di
me,
più
I don't
succede.
know, more and more these things are happening.
E poi andiamo a leggere
Then we
gli
read
studi
of studies
fatti bene
that are
quali sono
well
le
made
cause
of
dei
what are the
tumori.
causes of
Fra le
causes of
cause
cancer.
dei tumori
Among them, there
viene
are
fuori che oltre il 67% era quello
comes out that other than the 60%, I don't remember the exact numbers, but if I remember well, it was
delle
like
cause rilevate dei tumori
76% of
sono di
the causes of cancer
personali, di scelte
are
di vita.
are related to lifestyle
Poi ci
choices,
sono le
personal
cause
choices.
ambientali,
Then there are
poi ci sono le
environmental
cause
causes, then there are
genetiche,
genetical causes,
ma la stragrande
but the
maggioranza delle
greatest
cause
majority of the
riguardano
causes are about
le nostre proprie scelte.
our own choices.
Quindi io mi chiedo
So I ask myself,
perché
why
parlare dei tumori?
to talk about cancer?
Perché vogliamo evitarli.
Because we want to avoid them.
Perché vogliamo dire no,
We
io
want
quella roba lì
to
a me.
say, okay, no, I don't want that for me.
Quindi quali sono
And
le
so,
cause
what
che
are
posso
the
evitare?
causes that
Che
I
esiste
can
una
avoid? Because
correlazione
there is a
fra
correlation
il
between
fumo
the
e il
smoke
tumore al
and
polmone?
the lung
Per esempio?
cancer, to name
Quindi la
one.
logica cosa dice?
So, what does logic say?
Vuoi avere il tumore? Fuma.
You want to have cancer, you
Non
smoke.
vuoi avere il
You don't
tumore?
want to have cancer,
Non fuma.
you don't smoke.
Poi,
And then,
nello stesso modo, la
in
logica
the
dice
same
qual
way,
è una delle
logic says, what
principali
is one of the
cause
main
del tumore?
cause of
Lo
cancer?
stress cronico,
Chronic stress,
che crea l'infiammazione
which
cronica.
creates chronic inflammation.
Quindi io voglio avere i
And so,
tumori? No,
I
dovrei
don't want to have cancer, no?
diminuire
Then I need to
lo
decrease
stress cronico.
the chronic stress
Fermare
to
questo.
stop
Come
that.
faccio? Devo
How do
cambiare
I
stile
do
di
that? I
vita.
need to change lifestyle. Ah, yes.
Ma faccio fatica.
Ah, but it's difficult. Yeah, me too. But
Puoi scegliere,
you can
puoi
choose.
continuare
You
così, siamo
can
liberi.
go on like that. We are free.
Ognuno si
But
può
then
tocca da
everyone
vivere le
has to
proprie
face
conseguenze.
the consequences.
Si può cambiare.
We
si
can
può
change.
fare.
We can do a lot.
Perciò il punto che c'è qua non
So
è
the
di
point that
vedere
it's
le cose
here is not
brutte
to
per stare con paura
see the
delle
bad
cose
things, to
brutte
remain
come
with
se
the
fossero
fear
una
of the
minaccia.
bad things as if they were a threat.
Noi non dobbiamo vivere
We
nella paura
shouldn't
dell'inferno,
live with
nella
the
paura
fear
dei
of the
reali
hells or of
vincitori.
the lower
Non è che c'è il
realms. It's not
fatto
that
che
there
uno
is the
quando
fact that
muore per
when
forza dovrà
one
andare
dies,
a
then
avere una
one will
vita
have to go
inferiore.
and have a
Assolutamente
lower
no.
rebirth. No,
Ma
definitely
dobbiamo
not. But
avere
we
la
need
consapevolezza
to
e la
have the
coerenza
awareness and
di
the
come
coherence
viviamo
of
la nostra
how we
vita
live
oggi.
our life today.
Io certe cose
I
non le faccio. Che voglio
will
bene a me
not do
stesso.
certain things because I love myself, first of all.
Io non voglio agire
I
con
don't want to
violenza.
act with violence.
Non voglio essere
I don't
falso.
want to be fake,
Non
false.
voglio
I don't want
desiderare la
to
sofferenza.
desire the suffering of the other.
Perché io sono convinto che
Because
questo
I
fa
am
male a me
convinced
e
that this
e io mi
hurts
voglio bene.
myself and the others, and I love myself.
Quindi dal momento in cui mi
So,
voglio bene, io faccio a me
since
quello che
I love myself, then I do to me what is good for me. I avoid what is
fa male.
bad for me.
Ok? E purtroppo
And
quello che la verità ci
unfortunately,
fa vedere
what
è
the
che
Lam
non
Rim
è
shows to us is that it's not a joke.
certe volte le conseguenze
Sometimes
possono essere
consequences
molto
can
gravi.
be very serious.
E una volta che una conseguenza
And
si manifesta,
once
un
that
ciclo
a
nasce, a quel
consequence
punto dobbiamo vivere
manifests
con tutte le
itself and the cycle is born, we have to live it until it's consumed.
Ci sarà un altro,
And
non è
then
che
there will
finisce
be another
tutto,
one.
si
It's
può
not
fare
that
ancora.
everything ends and you can't do
A un
anything
certo
anymore.
punto quel ciclo
Then
finisce,
that cycle ends,
però mentre lo
and
viviamo è
as we
forte.
live it, it's strong.
Perciò
And so
qua il prossimo punto che
here
non
the
apriamo
next
adesso,
step
solo lo
that we
accenniamo,
don't open now, but we only
viene detto cosa
mention
faccio quindi
is,
per
okay, then what do I do
evitare
in order to
la sofferenza
avoid
in questo senso, in futuro,
suffering
evitare le
in
cause
this
della
sense and to
sofferenza.
avoid the causes of suffering?
Prima di tutto devo
First of all, I
scegliere
need to
dove
choose
prendere rifugio.
where to take refuge.
E qua viene la cosiddetta
And
presa di
here
rifugio.
there is the
Perché
so-called
noi prendiamo rifugio tutti i
take of
giorni,
refuge,
tante
because we
volte.
take refuge every day, many times.
Per dire uno
So to
quando
speak,
sente
when
tanto
one
freddo dove prendere rifugio?
feels a lot of cold, where does he take refuge? In
Riscaldamento,
the,
una casa calda.
on the heating, on the warm house,
Quando uno ha tristezza dove
on
prende
the
rifugio?
blanket. When one is sad, where does he take refuge?
Ognuno ha le sue,
Everyone has his own way.
ok? Lascio a voi la
I leave
risposta
to you the
interna,
inner answer,
però spesso può essere
but
nel
often it can be like the
nel
chocolate,
comprare
or
le
in
scarpe
buying
piuttosto che
shoes,
qualunque
or
altra cosa
whatever
sulla
else,
nel fare
or
qualunque
in
cosa. Ci sono
doing
tante cose,
whatever.
però di
But
solito quando c'è un
usually, when there is like
conflitto
an
interno,
inner
una
conflict,
sofferenza
an inner suffering,
prendiamo rifugio fuori o dentro?
do we take refuge outside or
Prendiamo
inside?
rifugio fuori.
We take refuge
Funziona?
outside. Does it work?
Nì.
Yes and no.
Momentaneamente?
Momentarily,
Sì, dai.
yeah,
Se sei
maybe it
molto
does. Like
triste
if you're very sad
e non riesci a
and you really
gestire quella
cannot
tristezza,
manage
tutto quello,
that
prendi
sadness,
un
and you
po'
take
di
like a double glass of whiskey,
momentaneamente passa la
momentarily
tristezza.
does sadness
Non ho mai
pass.
provato, però
I
io una
never
volta mi
tried,
sono
but
ubriacato
once,
in
only
Italia,
once I
11
got
anni
drunk
circa.
in my life. I was
Però,
like 11 years old.
finiti in ospedale,
I ended up in a hospital,
quasi in coma etilica,
almost
non è da
in
ripetere.
coma. It's not to be repeated.
Comunque sia,
quello che succede è che
So what happens is that momentarily,
prendere rifugio in qualunque cosa, per dire una banalità,
okay, I'm sad, I look at a movie, that sadness can pass momentarily, but it's as if, okay, like there is something rotten that stinks, then I put some perfume on it, and then I don't feel the smell anymore, then after a while it comes back. So we take refuge on many things, but our problem is that usually we take refuge on things that don't sustain it. The refuge that we need to take and hold and sustain is in a deep and real change of conduct.
è il prendere
Is
rifugio
the take of refuge in our own sane conduct.
il prendere
Is
rifugio in
our take of refuge in a coherent life, in a physical,
sano, virtuoso,
virtuous way, pacific way, in a virtuous, positive speech, in a positive mind, to take refuge in love, in gratitude, in patience, in generosity. But in order to do that, I need help. I need someone to give me the means to develop that. I need someone to help me face my anger, to develop patience, that someone that helps me to see things with clarity, not to remain trapped in my ignorance. And it's here that I take refuge in the Buddha that shows me the path. I take refuge in the Dharma that is the effective path. And I take refuge in the Sangha that is the spiritual company along this path. Because we are herd animals, we need company. And so, when we go towards a direction and we are not alone, that gives us an indifferent strength. And so,
prendere rifugio
take refuge in the Dharma.
non è solamente
It's not only to listen to the teachings and to feel that one is a Buddhist or not. It's not just that. It's to take refuge in an inner process of development of one's own qualities. And as a result, gradually one overcomes one's own shadows. This is the main point. If we do this with coherence, in a constant way, coherent, sincere, real, there is no need to worry about the future, because a present that is lived well, taking away the debts of the past that we don't know what they are, and sooner or later we will face them, brings to a sane future.
perciò
And so I will die. I don't know when.
cosa succede dopo la morte?
What happens after death? I have to be rebirthed. I don't know where. To be reborn, I don't know where. If I start to look at the various possibilities, there is a tremendous quantity of possibilities where I would say, no, I don't want to be there. Because if we take for granted that we are reborn as human beings, but also here, where?
È facile scegliere?
It's easy to choose. You see those two, they just got married, they look very nice. Maybe let's wait a few years before choosing them as parents.
O meglio approfittare i primi anni?
Or
Non lo
maybe
so.
it's better to take advantage of the first years. I don't know.
Ok? Non è
It's
semplice.
not easy.
Io ho già pensato alcune volte, se uno avesse la
Okay, if one has the possibility of choosing with full awareness where to be born, imagine the complexity of the search. It's not easy.
e avere una rinascita
And to have a rebirth where one has a healthy body, in a healthy family, with the right conditions to practice the Dharma, the material conditions that are minimally necessary, it's not obvious at all. Sometimes I was thinking about this, going round and round, and then I was like, okay, to be back where I was born wasn't bad. Like I would go back there because it went very well to me, but it's not so easy. It's not so obvious.
Perciò
And so we shouldn't have the uncertainty of the future as a cause of suffering, because at the same time that the future is uncertain, the causes are certain. I don't know if this is clear.
man mano che io ammetto i numeri nell'equazione,
As I add numbers to the equation, I don't know what will the result be, but what I sum increases and what I subtract decreases, that is for sure. And so the future is uncertain, present is certain. So we live the present at our best and with coherence, with awareness, with respect, with love. And here we go back to the point that we took already many times, and then where we say, okay, the first step in our path is to abandon what is harmful and to cultivate what is good for us. What shows us here is that it's not just enough to look at the short term, thinking about this, okay, but to think more in the long term, also from one life to the other. And someone can say, Lama, but I don't believe in reincarnation. Okay, fine.
Credi in una coerenza fra le azioni?
But do you believe in a coherence between actions and results? Even if we're not talking about the karmic results, do you want to be reborn with the tendency to lying, or to anger, or to hatred? I don't know if you ever realized when you look at young children, me, it seems that they have like already important predispositions showing. I'm sorry to say with these words, but there are some children that have like a sort of meanness, don't they?
Le poche volte che avevo litigato,
I remember that the few things when I was a kid, was a child, I had like this kid that was in my class. He liked to smash ants, and so I had some empathy towards ants, and I was like, oh, yeah, imagine like a giant coming to you and smashing you. I was trying to protect the ants and almost getting to fight with him. But these are predispositions that one has, other than the education that also plays a role, but one is born already with predispositions. So, okay, I don't know about karmic force here and there, but me, definitely, I don't want to have certain predispositions, other than the fact that in this very life, anger is harmful, violence is harmful for me also. Sometimes we were able to create like a sort of thick barrier where we pretend that some things are not harmful for us. We live in a sort of superficiality, and all the damage that we do to ourselves, it's as if we put the dirt below the carpet, but then sooner or later it comes out. I don't know if you ever seen people that were very aggressive during their adult life, and then when they get very old, they become very, I won't say sweet, but like the opposite, kind of very fragile and so on. There is a place where there is a suffering, inner suffering, a sense of guilt, a pain, of having acted with violence in a way that it's aware or not, that generates inside of oneself a place of intense suffering. An act of suffering doesn't end in itself, both for who does that and for who receives that. It doesn't end there. And then it's up to us to face what is left, so we have to take care of the wounds and heal them, and that can be done. But from the point of view, both from the next life, the future lives, and from the point of view of this life, also on the collective level or individual level, there are some things that are harmful. And it's strange how we have a hard time to really avoid them. Let's imagine how much simpler the world would be if we were able to be more sincere and not lie. I found myself recently in a situation with conflict, trying to face it. And I was happy to meet a person, to be able to clear some things, and there was no way of doing that. Because let's try to clear things up, but when the other person doesn't feel like it and keeps on lying and lying to oneself and the other, it's very difficult to have a dialogue. And how much suffering is created out of lies, out of the lack of sincerity towards oneself and the other. And we see that, we know that, but at least let's try to apply it in our own lives, to have the courage to tell the truth,
Avere il coraggio di essere
to have the
sinceri,
courage to be sincere with ourselves and towards the other,
avere il coraggio di costruire la
to have
pace.
the courage of building peace in our own lives, and consequently
Contesto in cui noi
in the context where we find ourselves.
Perché inevitabilmente
Because inevitably in the life of each one of us there will be times of conflict. Wouldn't there?
qualcuno qua che non ce li ha?
Is there someone here that doesn't have them? No one, really?
Immaginavo.
I thought so.
Quando noi ci troviamo dinanzi a una situazione
But when we are in a situation of conflict, we can choose how to react.
voglio reagire,
Whether I want to react in the same way, with aggressiveness,
posso difendermi.
I can defend myself from an attack. But this doesn't mean that there needs to be a counterattack.
Uno non deve per forza rimanere sotto i
One doesn't need to remain below the fists of the other, but also one doesn't necessarily have to hurt the other.
Quando noi riusciamo
And
a
when
prendere una
we are
situazione
able to
difficile e affrontarla
leave a
mantenendo
difficult
la
situation
nostra dignità,
by maintaining
i
our
nostri valori,
dignity,
i
our
nostri
values,
principi
our
sani,
sane principles,
quando si conclude quel
when
processo,
that
anche per
process
quanto
ends,
faticoso sia,
even for
usciamo
how
molto più
difficult it
forti,
could be, we get out much stronger,
molto più equilibrati.
much more balanced.
Quello ci fa in modo che
And
le
that
prossime
makes it
difficoltà
so that
diventano
the
molto più facili da
following
affrontare.
difficulties will become much easier to
Quando noi
face.
affrontiamo una difficoltà,
When we face a
entriamo
difficulty
nel
and we
gioco
get
della rabbia,
into the
dell'odio, del
play of
rancore,
anger, of
dell'attacco, del
rancor, of the
contrattacco,
attack and the
eccetera,
counterattack and so on,
quando finisce quello,
when
c'è
that
una
ends,
quantità di ferite
there
da
is
guarire.
a quantity of wounds that needs to be healed that is infinite.
Perciò il nostro problema
And so our problem is not hell. Our problem are our own unhealthy, harmful habits. And here it's up to each one of us and to look at oneself and to say, okay, what do I do? The good news
è che la consapevolezza è il primo passo.
is that awareness is the first step,
Nessuno
and no one
deve avere la
needs
pretesa con se
to
stesso
have
di
the
essere già
pretense with oneself to have already
vedo una condotta
arrived.
che fa
I see a
male, vedo
conduct that is
un'abitudine
harmful,
malsana.
an
Questo vuol
unhealthy
dire che potrò evitarlo del tutto?
habit. Does it mean that I can avoid it altogether? Absolutely not.
Vuol dire che ho consapevolezza.
It means that I
io
have
ripeto
awareness,
quella
and the more I
consapevolezza,
repeat
piano piano
that
riesco a
awareness, then bit by bit
direzionarmi
I'm able to
per
direct
cambiare la mia
myself
condotta.
to change my conduct.
Ricadrò
But
sicuramente.
I will fall
Una
back
volta che mi cado,
again.
mi rialzo.
And once I fall, then
E
I get up again.
idealmente, se facciamo il
And
percorso
ideally,
giusto,
if
quello
we
che
take the
accade è
right
che
path, what happens
ogni
is that
caduta diventa un po'
every
meno
time I fall,
profonda
it
e la
becomes
distanza fra
a
una
little
all'altra
bit
diventa
less
sempre
deep,
maggiore.
and the distance between one fall and the other becomes greater.
E poi c'è una volta che uno
And
riesce a non
then
cadere per tanto tempo, poi ha una caduta
there
e
is
già pensavo
like
di
a
avercela
time,
fatta. Ce la stai
maybe a
facendo.
longer time where one is not falling and then falls, and then is like, "Ah, I thought I was succeeding." Yes, you are.
Perciò
It's not that it just happens like that.
ho cominciato oggi
And so I started
dicendo il
today
fatto che gli insegnamenti, no,
by saying that
tanti dicono, "Ah, che bello, che
teachings,
piacevoli." E non
like,
sempre gli insegnamenti
okay,
sono
teachings are not always pleasant.
Ci sono delle volte che
Sometimes,
noi andiamo a vedere certe
if
volte insegnamenti su
we
questi
see
argomenti
the teachings on
dati
these
in un certo
subjects
modo,
given in
uno
a certain way,
finisce
one
dopo
ends
aver fatto le dediche sembra che
after
abbia un pugno nello
having
stomaco.
made the dedications, and it seems like as if he received a punch in the
Con una
stomach,
ragione,
with a reason for that.
che è quella di dire
That is that of saying,
quello è possibile,
ah, that is possible, and I want to avoid it.
è questo.
It's that.
No? È pazzesco perché
And it's crazy because when we talk about the absurdities that happened on the world of the wars, the genocides and so on, what is one of the reasons for which you want to keep memory alive? Theoretically, for not repeating them. But very often it happens that instead of using that memory to not repeat it, it's used to maintain alive an attitude of victimism, and so to maintain the enemy alive rather than so you maintain a conflict rather than trying to pacify. So it's right to see that it's not right, but getting to the point of seeing what should we do today in order to heal that thing. I repeat once what we have already talked about many times. Energy should be placed towards light, towards the antidote, not in the problem, in the sickness. So for as much as today we talked about heavy subjects, the energy shouldn't be placed in staying there and thinking about the hells and being afraid of that, but our energy should be placed in cultivating what is positive, what is virtuous, what is good, and naturally to avoid what is bad for us. And then the awareness of health more further on will bring us to another aspect, which is that of compassion, because to see suffering, first of all, it becomes like, I don't want to suffer. When I manage to put myself in a safe place, and okay, and the others, and then I want to help. Because we usually want to help someone when we are not in that situation. But if we are in that situation, then we want to get out of that situation ourselves first. And so I am happy that today we were able to face this subject, which is a bit of a taboo, of hells and of the lower realms and so on, without getting into a place where one feels threatened, where there is a sense of guilt or of threat. But I hope that we can have this experience of checking, okay, and saying that can happen, and I don't want to get there. It's like a person that is constantly in a state of lamentation, criticism, lamentation and criticism, and lamentation and criticism, and then hatred kicks in, and then there is lamentation, and then envy, and then anger, and gets into a loop, and the more you follow that loop, and the more stronger it gets, and it can become a nightmare. It can get to a sort of hell, like a light hell compared to the others, but always hell is. And so, let's protect ourselves, let's take care of ourselves in the mid and long term. And I repeat one last time, to change habits is difficult. Yes. But it brings great benefits when the change is positive. And the Buddhist practice is based on changing habits. This actually is the main part. To change habits, the negative habits, to abandon them slowly and to cultivate the good ones, getting and talking about mostly our way of thinking and our way of interacting, the emotions that we have, educating ourselves in a positive, virtuous way.
Un'ultima cosa prima di concludere.
One last thing before concluding, and it's an advice. Aside from all of this, I was observing in this period, and I saw in the lives of many people moments of particular tension, particular conflicts, difficulties, things that happened that one would have never thought, imagined. And I saw this in many moments. There are moments where there are greater tensions, but like when there is like a chain, and at a certain point one ring is a bit weak, and someone goes there and pulls the chain with strength. Why does the chain break? Because the ring was weak, or because someone pulled it? For both.
Abbiamo detto prima, le cause non è mai una.
So, as we said before, causes, there is never only one cause. So, the weak ring was the cause, or one, and the pulling of the chain was the condition. When there are also tensions on a global scale, what happens is that in each one of us, where there are the weakest points, spots, are those where there is a break. And one of the most important things is not to get into an attitude of being reactive. Not getting into that play of victimism, of attack and counterattack, of aggressiveness and violence. And it's very important, because otherwise we are here thinking, talking about how for hours and hours, and then maybe like a very small thing happens, and then we justify ourselves. But actually, when we see that there are some situations, then okay, I breathe. I want to kill you, okay, I breathe.
Prendi il mala.
Take the mala and you breathe in again, and breathe out. If that moment is too intense, then you breathe in from the nose and breathe out from the mouth. Once I taught this technique to children between 3 and 4 years. 3 and 5 years, they were all so cute and small. And at a certain point I told them, look, there is a secret. Do you ever get angry? Yes. Do you like it? No. When you get angry, before saying anything, you do like this. And you take all the anger out. And we did it a few times together. A few days after that, one of these kids is home, and the mother gets angry, and he sits in the corner like this, and the mother asks, what are you doing? I'm throwing away the anger. It works. But we also need to do that, we adults. So what happens is that when there are moments of particular tension, this is manifested in the macro, but also in the micro level. If we look at geopolitical macro scale, is it like a calm period? No, we are in a particularly conflictuous moment. If we check, these moments also mirror somehow on the micro scale in our lives. So we shouldn't get into the reactivity. We shouldn't react. We shouldn't get into the dynamic of conflict. This is an advice for everyone. If there is a direct attack, then one protects oneself, moves away, but doesn't get into the aggressive dynamic of attacking the other and being the victim. This is an advice for everyone. Because otherwise what happens is that the tension ends, the thing has gone away, but then the wounds to heal are too many.
Facciamo le conclusioni.
Now, let's conclude, let's make the dedications of the Lam Rim. The next time we will restart again with the take of refuge, with the detailed explanation of the take of refuge.
E poi ci sarà la parte di osservare,
then,
capire il samsara in un senso più ampio.
There is the part of understanding samsara in a deeper way, and then bit by bit we go on.
Un'informazione di servizio.
Service information. Before I forget, it is not granted, but there is a very high probability that according to a higher, stronger causes, the weekend that was for the next teachings of the Lam Rim around the middle of May,
24, qualcosa del
23,
genere, non potrò
24, I
essere.
will not be able to be there.
Lo dico solo adesso
I
per
say
che
now
si
so that
prepari un
one
po'
can
per quello,
prepare,
poi
and
verrà, appena avevo la certezza
then
lo avvisiamo.
as soon as I have the certainty, we will say the new dates.
Dipende come uno si organizza la vita.
Depends on how one organizes his own life.
Facciamo le nostre dediche,
Now let's make our
dedichiamo
dedications. We
affinché ognuno di
dedicate
noi
so
possa
that each one
sviluppare
of us can develop
consapevolezza
awareness
delle proprie
of
azioni, dei
one's own
risultati che
actions and the
queste
results
portano e
that they
portare a
bring,
una
and to bring
vita più coerente,
to a more
più
coherent
sana.
life, more sane.
Ok? Sashi pöke chushi medo chan rirab lingshi nide gemba de sangye shindo mikde ulwargi drogo namda shingla che parasho yidam guru ratna mendral kam niryata yami. Terni rindo bele tsoni ni katara yamba kanshi sapate lomi mare gidon chowana namren gyawe wangbor dagyurchi terma songwe tsera kundu yang chambe yangi tsewe jesongne Tempe rimpa kunsa lamge cho nyene drube gyalam nyeche sho rangi jishin tokpe lamge ne shukdra tsewe changpe tapke ki drowe yigi mumpa selche ne gyawe tempa yun zingyur chi Tempa rinchen chogi makya pam kyapkyan nyambra gyurwe chokterani ninje chemba yiraba kyepa pende terte selwar chebra sho seche gyawe mechon chinlele lektro chancho lamge rimbe kyang tarde namge yila paltereshi kyawe tsepa rindo kyongyur chi lamsan drube tungen drupche chi gegen seche midam mimin kun tsera kundu gyawe ngak namda lamdan chalwar margyur chi kanse tekpa chola chu 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 tsushin drubla champa teyi tse tuden namge takto chokche chi trashi gyatso chokun kyab gyur chi jetson lame kutse rapten chi namkara trinle chokchur gepada losan tembe drume sasumgi drove munsela tatu ne gyur chi kewakuntu yanda lamata drame cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yunte dorje change kopa Nyur tobe sho nimo dele tsendel Ninsen takto delekpe Kuncho sumke chingi lob Kuncho sumke ngodrubo sol Kuncho sumke trashisho All'alba o al tramonto di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli
Dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Ripetete dopo di me.
Repeat after me.
Chö lam tudro. Lam la parce. Miyom arsho. Possa la mente
May
diventare il
the
Dharma.
mind become the Dharma.
Possa il Dharma
May
diventare il
Dharma
sentiero.
become the path.
Possa il
May the
sentiero
path
essere
be
libero
free
da
from
interferenze.
interferences.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you, everyone.
Ci vediamo presto. Domani
We'll
mattina.
see again each other soon. Tomorrow morning there will be also some teachings. Now who wants to come for saying hi quickly, briefly?